I am James, 35 years old, living in San Francisco, where the steep streets and morning fog seem to embrace my soul. I run a financial technology company, something people call successful. But if you saw me, you'd probably think I'm just an ordinary guy wearing a simple shirt, fond of black coffee and quiet street corners. I don't boast, nor do I crave the spotlight, perhaps because I learned long ago to hide the scars in my heart. I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis in a white wooden house with a green fence and a backyard full of weeds. It sounds warm, but to me that place was an invisible prison. My parents, Robert and Helen, weren't bad people, but they had a distorted way of loving. They poured all their attention, love, and pride onto Ethan, my younger brother. Ethan, the golden child, was always celebrated, always placed on a pedestal. And me? I was a faint shadow, the superfluous one in my own family. As a child, I grew accustomed to being overlooked. My birthdays were often marked by a cheap cake, sometimes without even candles. Meanwhile, Ethan's birthdays were a festival. Balloons, expensive gifts, and our parents' radiant smiles. During summer vacations, my parents took Ethan to Disney World while I stayed home with my grandmother, listening to her old stories. At first, I wasn't jealous, I was just sad. A childish, innocent sadness I didn't know how to name. But that sadness grew over the years like a seed buried deep, waiting to crack open. I vividly remember the day I turned 18 when my parents announced they would pay for Ethan's college education, but I had to fend for myself. "James, you can manage on your own," my father said, his voice cold, as if I didn't deserve their support. I gritted my teeth and worked 3 jobs, from waiting tables at a diner to delivering newspapers in the early morning, to pay for my tuition. Ethan? He drove the brand new car our parents bought him, smiling brightly on Instagram, oblivious to my struggles. The greatest pain came when I was 25. At the time, I had just started a small company with big dreams. But then a crisis hit. I was short on money, and the company was on the brink of collapse. Trembling, I called my parents, asking to borrow $10,000, just $10,000, enough to keep my dream alive. "James, you're always a failure," my mother said over the phone, her voice sharp as a knife. "You're not worth the risk," my father added. "Learn from Ethan. At least he knows what to do with his life." I clenched my lips, trying to hold back the sobs. 2 days later, I found out they had just given Ethan $30,000 to buy a new Mustang. $30,000 without a single question or moment of hesitation. I stood in my rundown apartment, staring at the peeling walls, feeling as if my heart had been torn apart. I wasn't just rejected, I was erased. In their eyes, I was useless, unworthy of existing. That night, I sat alone, a bottle of cheap liquor on the table, but I didn't drink. I looked in the mirror, saw my red, teary eyes, and told myself, "James, you don't need them. You'll make it." That pain, bitter and cold, became the fire within me. I threw myself into work, forgetting day and night. I built my company from the ashes, step by step, drop by drop of sweat. But deep inside, the scar remains, smoldering, never healing. I'm not telling this story to complain. I'm telling it because this is me, the fragments that have shaped who I am today. I've learned to live with the pain, to turn it into strength. And now I am James Harper, a discreet millionaire, the owner of a financial technology company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It sounds glamorous, but I don't live for the limelight. I wear t-shirts, ride a bike to the office, and enjoy quiet evenings alone with an old book. My success isn't about money. It's about proving my worth despite my parents' insults. Useless, failure. Those words were once chains, but now they're the fuel that drives me forward. My company, Nexus, develops software to help small businesses manage their finances. I started from nothing, from sleepless nights coding in a moldy apartment. Now Nexus has hundreds of employees, offices in 3 cities, and multi-million-dollar contracts. But I keep my identity private. I don't appear in newspapers or flaunt my success on social media. I don't want the world to know, especially not my family. They don't deserve to know. Then one Wednesday afternoon, as I sat in my office watching the drizzle outside the window, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Minneapolis area code. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated but answered. My father's voice came through, dry and detached, as if he was calling out of obligation. "James, it's your father. Ethan's getting married. The bride is Sophia, the daughter of his boss, Charles. They're hosting an engagement party at the house next week. The whole family needs to be there." I fell silent, feeling as if someone was squeezing my chest. My father continued, his tone flat. "But you don't need to come, James. The bride's family is important. We don't want to lose face." Those words hit like a punch. I heard my mother's faint laughter in the background, as if they were mocking me. I clenched my fist, nails digging into my skin, but said nothing. "All right, I understand," I replied, then hung up. It had been 3 years since I last spoke to my parents, and now they called, not to care, not to check on me, but to insult and humiliate me. Less than 10 minutes later, Ethan called. His voice was sweet, fake, as always. "Hey, James, I'm inviting you to the engagement party, but you know it's better if you don't come. The bride's family doesn't like failures. You don't want to embarrass the family, right?" I could hear the smugness in every word. Ethan, like our parents, still saw me as a loser, a stain they needed to hide. I sat there, staring at the dark phone screen, feeling my blood boil. The old pain surged back, the years of being abandoned, compared, and belittled. But this time I didn't cry. I didn't break. Instead, a cold, sharp thought flashed in my mind. I'll show them. Not for revenge, but to force them to face the truth. I'm not useless. I'm James Harper, and I'll make them regret this. I started to act. Through an old friend in Minneapolis, I learned that my family was drowning in debt. Ethan, as usual, spent money like it grew on trees. He bought luxury watches, traveled to Europe, and racked up loans everywhere. My parents, indulging him, had drained their savings. They were planning to sell the white wooden house where I grew up to pay off their debts. But the real estate market was sluggish, and they hadn't found a buyer. Hearing this, a jolt of electricity ran down my spine. This was my chance. I called Sarah, a trusted real estate agent in Minneapolis. "Sarah, I want to buy a house," I said, my voice calm but my heart pounding. "My parents' house. I'll pay above market value, but there are a few conditions." I demanded the deal be finalized on the day of Ethan's engagement party and the buyer's identity remain anonymous. I would use my company Nexus to conceal my involvement. Sarah was surprised but didn't pry. "Are you sure, James? This isn't just buying a house, it's personal." I gave a faint smile. "Exactly. It's personal." I planned meticulously. I would show up at the party with Sarah, right when everyone was in the middle of their lavish meal. I would reveal that I was the buyer of the house, and more than that, I would demand that my parents move out immediately. The thought made me both exhilarated and trembling. I didn't want to hurt them, not really. But I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they'd caused me. I wanted them to understand that their injustice had consequences. Each day I checked emails and coordinated with Sarah to ensure everything was on track. I also prepared myself mentally. I knew facing my family wouldn't be easy. My parents would make excuses, Ethan would point fingers, and I needed to stand firm. I practiced what I would say in front of the mirror, but every time I looked into my eyes, I saw the young James abandoned in the corner of the house. "You've got this," I whispered to myself. "You're not that kid anymore." The night before flying to Minneapolis, I sat in my apartment looking out at the city's glowing lights through the window. I sipped my coffee, feeling as if I were standing at the edge of a cliff. I wasn't scared, but I was tense. This wasn't just a real estate transaction. This was a battle for my dignity, and I wouldn't lose. The plane touched down at Minneapolis Airport at 5 in the afternoon as the sunset poured honey over the gray clouds. I pulled my suitcase through the terminal, each breath dissolving into the biting cold of November. It had been 3 years since I last set foot on this land. The place I once called home was now just an unhealed scar in my memory. 45 minutes later, I stood in front of the white wooden house from my past. It looked exactly as I remembered, rusted gate, walls stained with peeling paint. But one thing was different. Sarah was waiting, holding a stack of documents, her eyes calm yet resolute like tempered steel. I took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of my simple but sharp black suit, and stepped into the house from which I had once been mercilessly cast out. Inside, nothing had changed. The family portrait hung crookedly, the worn-out rug lay underfoot, and from the dining room came laughter. So fake it was piercing. The laughter stopped abruptly as I appeared in the doorway. My parents, Ethan, Sophia, and Mr. Charles, Sophia's father, all turned to face me. My mother dropped her silver spoon, her face pale as a ghost. My father stood frozen while Ethan furrowed his brow, lips pursed as if he couldn't believe the one they had once discarded dared to return. "James," my mother stammered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here?" I didn't rush to answer. I strode into the center of the room, Sarah close behind. Their eyes pierced me like sharp knives, but I stood firm, my gaze sweeping over each of them. "I'm here to talk about this house," I said, my voice low and cold as the wind outside. "The house I just bought." The room seemed to freeze. My father's face turned ashen, my mother clutched her chest, and Ethan shot to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor behind him. "What the hell are you talking about?" he roared, his eyes bloodshot. I glanced at Sarah and she nodded, presenting the contract. "I paid double the market value," I said, locking eyes with my father, my voice as unyielding as nails driven into wood. "But with one condition, everyone must leave tonight." My mother burst into sobs while my father stammered incoherently. "James, you can't do this. This is our home." I let out a dry, bitter laugh, a fire blazing in my chest. "Your home?" My eyes scanned the room, recalling every humiliating moment. The place where I was just a spare, insulted, and kicked out into the rainy night. "No, Dad. This is mine now." Ethan lunged at me, grabbing my collar, his eyes burning with hatred. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled, his breath hot against my face. "Some failure in a fancy suit thinking he's somebody now?" I clenched my fists, slowly but forcefully prying his fingers off, exuding calm power. "Failure?" I smirked, my voice icy as frost. "My company is worth $300 million. And you, Ethan? Drowning in debt, lying to your fiancé, and leeching off our parents' money. So tell me, who's the real failure here?" The room fell deathly silent. Sophia's eyes widened, her lips pressed tight to hold back tears. Mr. Charles stood slowly, his face darkening like a storm about to break. "Robert, Helen," he said, his voice low but heavy as stone. "You called James a failure, but clearly he's the only one here with the courage to hold his head high." He turned to Sophia. "Let's go, sweetheart." Sophia nodded, tears brimming, but her eyes didn't once seek out Ethan. They left, leaving behind a chaotic room filled with shattered faces. I looked at my parents one last time. Regret flickered in their eyes, but my heart had long since run dry of forgiveness. "You have exactly 2 hours to pack," I said coldly, then turned and walked out. Ethan's screams echoed behind me, his curses dripping with venom, but I didn't look back. The door closed behind me, shutting out the past. I had won, not with hatred, but with truth. I stood in the yard, under the dim yellow streetlight, my breath turning to mist in the biting cold of Minneapolis. My parents dragged their suitcases out of the white wooden house, their shadows stretching long across the path. My mother sobbed, her shoulders trembling, while my father bowed his head, his steps heavy as if carrying the weight of the world. Ethan trailed behind, his face flushed, muttering curses under his breath but not daring to meet my eyes. The door of the house closed behind them with a dry click, like the end of a chapter. Watching them leave, I felt no satisfaction. Instead, an old memory surged back, sharp and painful. 3 years ago in this very house, during a Thanksgiving dinner, I had snapped. I remember clearly how my parents sat at the head of the table praising Ethan as if he were the sun while I was merely a shadow. "Ethan just got promoted," my mother boasted, her eyes gleaming. "And you, James? Still struggling with that pointless company of yours?" My father smirked and added, "Learn from your brother. At least he makes us proud." I had swallowed that anger for years, but that night I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my hands trembling, my voice choked. "Why?" I asked, looking straight at them. "Why am I always the spare in this family? I begged for $10,000 to save my company, and you called me useless. But when Ethan wanted $30,000 for a car, you handed it over without a question. Why?" The dining room fell silent. I waited, hoping for an apology, a hint of remorse, but my mother only frowned and said, "You're always too sensitive, James. We just want what's best for Ethan." My father was worse. "If you're not happy, then leave. Don't ruin our dinner." Ethan sat there, smirking as if I were a joke. I looked at them, my family, and realized I had never belonged here. I left that night, my suitcase light but my heart heavy. I swore I would never come back, never let them see me weak again. Over 3 years, I built Nexus from ashes, transforming myself into someone they couldn't dismiss. But now, standing here, watching them drag their suitcases away from the house I had just bought, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. They didn't apologize or admit their wrongs, just like 3 years ago. They only looked at me with a mix of fear and resentment before getting into their car and disappearing into the night. Sarah stood beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, James?" she asked. I nodded, but my throat burned with bitterness. "I'm fine," I said, though I knew I was lying. I turned to look at the white wooden house, now mine. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a declaration. I was no longer the abandoned boy. But deep down, I wondered if I would ever truly escape the shadow of my past. A month later, I stood in the lobby of a luxurious hotel in downtown San Francisco, where the annual tech conference was being held. My black suit fit perfectly as I moved through the crowd, shaking hands with a few partners and offering polite smiles. But inside, I still carried the echoes of that night in Minneapolis. My parents' resentful eyes, Ethan's venomous curses, and the white wooden house now in my name. I thought I had closed the door on my past, but it lingered, like a shadow under the bright lights. I was sipping coffee when a deep voice sounded behind me. "James Harper, right?" I turned, and there stood Charles, Sophia's father, the man who had quietly left the engagement party. Tall, with silver hair and sharp but not hostile eyes, he carried an air of authority. I nodded, slightly tense. "Mr. Charles, didn't expect to see you here." We sat in a quieter corner of the lobby where the light was softer and the noise of the conference faded into the background. Charles looked at me as if sizing me up. "You made quite an impression in Minneapolis," he said, his tone half joking, half serious. "Not many people would dare do what you did." I gave a faint smile but didn't respond. I wasn't here to boast. Then he asked, his voice lowering, "What do you think of Ethan? Honestly?" The question caught me off guard and I paused. I looked into my coffee, seeing my reflection in the dark liquid. Part of me wanted to stay silent, to let Ethan face the consequences of his actions. But another part, the part that wanted to protect the innocent, spoke up. "Ethan's not trustworthy," I said, my voice steady but firm. "From childhood, he's been spoiled. He stole money from our parents for luxury items, lied to cover his debts. If you're entrusting him with big responsibilities, be careful." I kept it brief, without embellishment, but every word was true. I didn't speak out of malice or revenge. I spoke because Charles didn't deserve to be deceived, and Sophia, though I didn't know her, didn't deserve to live with someone like Ethan. Charles listened without interrupting, his eyes darkening. "You know, James," he said, "Ethan's handling accounting for my company. If what you're saying is true—" He trailed off, but I understood. I nodded. "Check it, you'll see." A week later, I received an email from Charles. It was brief, just a few lines. Ethan had embezzled $2 million from the company. Charles uncovered it through an audit and fired Ethan immediately. For Sophia's sake, he didn't press charges, but the wedding was canceled. "Thank you, James," he wrote. "You saved me from a big mistake." I sat in my office staring at the email, feeling a mix of relief and emptiness. I didn't take pleasure in Ethan's downfall. I just felt tired. The truth had been exposed, but it didn't erase the scars in my heart. I closed my eyes, wondering if I would ever truly break free from that family, or if I was just running from myself. One beautiful morning in San Francisco, sunlight streamed through the office window, casting streaks of light across my desk. I was reviewing financial reports, the familiar rhythm of work keeping me focused. Nexus was now a small empire, and I, James Harper, remained the discreet figure behind it. The phone on my desk rang, pulling me from my thoughts. The receptionist's voice came through, hesitant. "Mr. James, someone wants to see you. They say they're your parents." My heart stopped. My parents? After everything, the white wooden house, the engagement party night, years of silence. They were here? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Bring them up," I said, my voice calm, but my hand tightened around the pen. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I wanted to face them. Not for their sake, but for mine. The door opened. My parents stepped in, followed by Ethan. They stood there, awkward, their eyes scanning the spacious room, the glass wall overlooking the city, and the nameplate on my desk. James Harper, CEO. My father, his hair grayer, looked a decade older. My mother, eyes red, forced a strained smile. Ethan, still smug, but his shoulders slumped like a defeated man. They were overwhelmed, I could tell. The son they once called useless now sat here in a world they couldn't touch. "James," my mother began, her voice trembling. We're sorry. We were wrong, treating you unfairly." My father nodded, adding, "We regret it. You're the pride of our family, and we didn't see it." Ethan reluctantly muttered, "Brother, I'm sorry. I was wrong to look down on you." I looked at them, saying nothing, waiting. An apology was something I had once craved, but now it felt like a passing breeze. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice even but cold. My mother hesitated, then said, "We're struggling, James. We lost the house, lost everything. We're hoping you can help. A house, some money to get by. And Ethan, he wants a good job here with you." Those words cut like an old knife. A house, money, a job. For me, a flick of the wrist could make it happen. Nexus could afford a dozen houses, countless managerial positions, but after everything, the years of abandonment, humiliation, being called a failure, I couldn't just let it go. Their apology I didn't trust. I needed to know if they were truly remorseful or just exploiting me, as they had once exploited my love to pamper Ethan. I leaned forward, looking straight into their eyes. "Help? After what you did? You kicked me out, called me useless. Ethan, you mocked me, said I wasn't worthy to stand beside you, and now you want me to save you?" My mother burst into tears. My father bowed his head, and Ethan flushed, stammering, "We're family, James. Can't you help?" I stayed silent, letting the heavy atmosphere weigh on them. Then I spoke slowly. "Nexus has no place for those who don't strive. But if you need jobs, I can help. The company's hiring security guards, janitors, warehouse workers. If you're willing, apply. I'll review fairly." I deliberately emphasized fairly, a reminder of the unfairness they had inflicted on me. All three were stunned. My mother covered her face, sobbing louder. My father slammed the desk, roaring, "You dare insult me like this? I'm your father!" Ethan lunged forward, pointing at my face. "You think you're better than me, you bastard. You'll regret this." I stood still, unfazed, watching them. Their reactions were exactly as I expected. Not remorse, just the desperation of people who needed money and status. "Leave," I said, opening the door. "I owe you nothing." They cursed, called me ungrateful, a traitor, then stormed out. The door closed, their footsteps fading. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly, but my heart felt lighter. I had tested them and they failed. I didn't need them anymore. I had Nexus, friends, and myself, and this time I knew I had made the right choice. I sat in my office looking out the window at the bustling streets of San Francisco. The city lights twinkled, but my heart was quiet. The white wooden house in Minneapolis was mine now, not just on paper but in my mind, a symbol of what I had overcome. Nexus continued to grow, new contracts poured in, and my team expanded. I lived independently, freely, surrounded by friends and partners who valued me. But every night, alone with the darkness, I asked myself, have I truly won? My family fell apart. Ethan lost his job, lost Sophia, and drowned in debt. My parents lived in a small apartment, silent, not daring to contact me again. Through old friends, I heard they regretted their actions, but no apology came. They had lost me. Not because I left, but because they never saw me as their son. I didn't take joy in their downfall. I only felt a deep sadness, as if I had lost them long ago. The white wooden house still stood, but I didn't return. I left it empty, neither selling nor renting it. Perhaps I kept it as a reminder. I had risen from the ruins. I had turned pain into strength, injustice into motivation. But I also learned that victory isn't about defeating others. Victory is living true to yourself, not letting the past define your future. I forgave, but I didn't reconcile. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or opening the door to those who hurt me. I chose to focus on what mattered, my work, my friends, and the dreams ahead. I was no longer the boy sitting in the corner waiting for love from my family. I was James Harper, and I was enough to love myself. But sometimes in quiet moments I wondered, was my approach right? Buying the house, confronting my family, exposing the truth, it was all to protect my dignity, but did I go too far? I don't regret it, but I question, if it were you, what would you do? If your family turned their backs on you, called you useless, abandoned you, would you choose to forgive, retaliate, or simply walk away quietly? I chose my path, but sometimes I still wrestle with that decision.